supposed to look at the TV, so everybody look at the TV. Yep.
Oh, be quick.
Okay, who did you coach at semis? Please be quick. Max.
Annika Greer, Travis, Will Morad. All the semis, and Linda Casemon.
Okay, Adam.
Alexis Raptis.
Yeah, sorry, that's it.
Wait, do it again.
Alexis Raptis.
Okay.
Bethany Flores, Stacy Laram, Lydia Fish, Ashley Wozni, and TT Tiender.
Very nice. Jake Berman. Oh no. Annalise Moore, Ellie Hiller, Jake Hendry, and then the CrossFit Lumberyard team at the West Coast.
Why did she get a very nice and me and Adam got nothing? You were like, oh, very nice list.
I was trying to go fast.
It's a fair grade. It's a fair grade.
Yeah.
Hey, she had the most.
Okay. If you could only pick one favorite moment of the weekend.
Lydia hitting the snatches.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, man, why'd you have to steal that
Yeah,
one?
why'd you have to steal that?
We can share, guys.
I'm going to just go with my longtime man, Travis Mayer, making it to the games.
Yeah, good one. Annalise Moore, she was in the first heat, and she absolutely crushed the handstand walk workout and beat her entire heat by the entire last handstand walk and like set off her awesome last day.
I mean, I was going to pick Lydia, but I'll pick something else. Also, the snatch ladder, similar kind of scenario. Bethany finishing that because that was kind of the crux of probably her making it or not. And she hadn't done it in full and hadn't snatched 175 in that capacity since semifinals last year. So
that was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah.
Scary for me as well. Also, I thought we were only talking about the East. Kyle brought up the West, so I'll say Linda making it to the games in Europe was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say Alexis getting on the podium was pretty cool, but I think that I yelled louder at Lydia making the snatches than I did at Alexis.
If you asking what I yelled loudest for, it was Travis to not drop the dumbbell.
Mike popped a blood vessel in his brain screaming for Travis.
He was legit hurt.
Yeah.
He was like, no, I can't talk right now.
Yeah. He was like, I feel dizzy. I can't walk. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm already panicked. I'm like, should I call 911? Like, what's going on?
how is he doing?
Mike?
Yeah.
He's fine.
Okay.
He's out there.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he has brain damage. No big deal.
We don't know. We haven't done an MRI yet. There might be something else.
This is a long one. Do you feel there was a major difference between how the programming impacted the female athletes who made it to the games versus the males?
You mean, I'm guessing, I'll just jump in and say, I'm guessing that they mean this year versus last year, because this year was like more simple
It
and
seems
more.
like they're talking about the difference between the genders versus last year.
Yeah. Did the programming select for a different type of male versus a different type of female? That's hard to
Yeah,
to
I feel like
no.
last year was more so that. This year I feel like was probably more similar, that you just needed to be very fit. Like it almost reverted back to kind of the classic old school Dave Castro open regional format in my eyes.
This is not gender differences, but in the East, I noticed that there were a lot more larger athletes that were in the top heat versus years in the past where you'd have a mix of, you're on the male side, like 5'6", 5'7" guys and 5'11", 5'10". And there were some really large athletes in that final heat.
But that seems only guys.
That was on the guys' side.
That happened in the East last year too, especially with the programming from last year. But I agree with you. I feel like this year, the difference from programming this year to last year was it kind of biased away from some of the heavier people in my mind. Like you think about some of this, like Jack Farlow, Bronislaw, Jake Douglas, Olivia, Amanda Barnhart, like people who made it last year with the test and body, like whatever it was, it might be a bad mix of tests or just not as favorable tests. But this year in general, I feel like it was more fitness based than anything else. But I don't think any differences between females and males. I think it was mostly like, I thought it was a well-balanced set of tests, and I think the fittest are going to be the ones that are going. I think it was mostly like the people that were closer to the bubble that get impacted by the nature of the tests.
Oh, yes. Will Adam sing the entire Tiny Toons theme song for a bottle of bourbon?
Nope.
Damn.
Okay, next.
Well, next question.
How did you get your athletes to stay mentally in?
Oh, that one I think was specifically also referenced Ashley, I think.
And Lydia.
Oh, and Lydia, that one?
Yeah, but I think this is relevant to everyone. So.
Yeah, you can go.
Oh, sure. I mean, Lydia and Ashley had almost polar opposite weekends as far as momentum. Ashley kind of started out a little slow, as if you're looking at leaderboard rankings, but we also knew going into the first two events would probably be the hardest for her, and then she would build momentum as the weekend went on. So we had a conversation before the competition. I said, listen, by the time you get to Sunday, don't be surprised if you're not in a great position, but you know that your best events are on that last day and they're back to back to back. That being said, there were definitely some execution errors. I think she could have probably been in a much better place going into Sunday, and I actually think she could have qualified for the games. But that third event, especially the legless one, I think was the hardest one, because it was, I'm looking forward to this event that I've done well on in practice to kind of bump me up, and she didn't execute as well as in practice. And I think that's also difficult with being able to practice these events for so long. Sometimes testing them, how they feel, isn't actually as good on the floor, and it messes with their decision making of, do I stick to my game plan, or are there alarms going off telling me I need to change something?
Yeah.
And I think that got her a little bit on the legless and impacted her performance there. But I would say she did a really good job of staying in the competition. And she was obviously sad and bummed, a bit quieter. If anyone knows Ashley, quiet and Ashley don't always happen. But she stayed in it and really bounced back that last day and gave herself a good shot of making it. So I think she was really proud of that. I was proud of her. And I would say that's more on her, really. The conversations between her and I think, like, when you're in that position, I really just try to say less, because you don't need to overanalyze what's happening or like, what could we have done better? If there's anything that's important that would be relevant to execution in the rest of events, you say something, but other than that, you just leave it. That's my opinion, how I kind of handle those things. And then Lydia was almost the opposite. Like, she built momentum the first 3 quarters of the entire competition. She's also just a very good competitor. She doesn't need a lot, and even though she was in a qualifying games position for a fair amount of the competition, we never talked about the games. Like, we never talked about anything being on the line, and we just, same thing, you just take it one event at a time. And I think just simplifying those things and not over dramatizing the situation they're in just kind of lets them naturally get through the comp and not stress them out too much.
Yeah. I would add, so I guess I had 2 athletes that had some tough mental experiences as well. Trav, I think I wouldn't take really any credit for this. Like you said, it was Ashley. I think the same, like Travis or Annika really have to take personal responsibility for their management of their mindset. Any contribution I think I had is over time. It's like in the coaching process. I feel like Travis's experience set him up, for better or worse, really well to be in the position that he was on the final day. Like, I told him I thought it was 6 times out of his 9 qualification that it was last workout and like do or die type experience. But because of that, his mindset this year just shifted really quick. Like, he was in the back. The handstand workout didn't go well. It was like 5 seconds away from being a 12th and ended up being a 20th, and just like couldn't hold the paces he needed. He missed a snatch in the snatch workout, which was a little bit slower, and that just happened to be a super fast heat. So he's going in like out of the cut line, and it was the quickest I've ever seen him just be like, all right. And I was like, look, you have no option other than to send it. Like, the fastest pace you've done in training, aim for unbroken, pick the dumbbells up and go unbroken. Like, that's like your back's against the wall. And I think his experience set him up that he could stay mentally in that way. Annika, it's a tougher thing. I feel like she kind of rode the emotions of the mindset, and that was kind of part of the problem, that workout 1 didn't go according to plan, and it was like a crash. And then from 2 to 5 were actually like pretty good confidence boosters, and it was a different type of pressure to be in, being inside the cut line on the last workout. And I think that was almost just as hard as the mental challenge of day 1 going into a tough workout for yourself. So I think I'm not sure if I did anything to contribute to that, but it's something from a mentality perspective that we just realized, like, hey, this is something we got to work on and figure out. If you're in these moments before, how do you lean on experience? Kind of like Travis or somebody who's more experienced can end up on the positive side of those more often than not, as opposed to like kind of, falling this short 2 years in a row.
I have a question. If that last event was a different event, do you think it would have changed her mindset?
I do. I think she is extremely good at stepping up under pressure when she knows she's confident at things, which is a marker of having to, like, you have to be like that if you're a great athlete in the sport. I think the next tier, the girls that can show up every year and no matter what the tests are able to shine and get to their potential even on their like damage control workouts. Like they can just put it in perspective and get the most points out of themselves. So instead of having a 34th on event one, maybe it ended up being a 24th or a 22nd, and then that ends up being the thing that pushes you over the end. So I do think it impacted her mentality. I'm just not entirely sure how to like change it yet. We're in process of figuring it out now.
Loading.
Yeah, loading. The little wheel, the spinning wheel.
Anything to add, Adam?
I feel like in general, one of the things that helps with athletes to stay mentally dialed in, regardless of the kind of athlete it is trying to make sure that the expectations are set ahead of time and get them as close to reality as possible. So like the differences with Ashley and Lydia, like Perrin does a really good job of making sure that the expectations beforehand are in reality. So like Ashley, hey, listen, 1, maybe 2, like they're probably not going to be great for you. If that goes better than expected, great. Like she's in a good spot. If that happens and that's reality, she was expecting it and she's ready to bounce back for it. For Lydia, like she's not going to get carried away because you guys did a really good job of making sure like, hey, listen, these first couple are going to go well. 5 and 6, probably not so much, but we're going to do the best we can to fight by the time we get there. So I think mentally dialed in, like Max said, it's less about reacting in the moment and more about trying to set those expectations ahead of time so that there's like some sort of synergy between what they're expecting and what it is that they're going to experience.
To kind of piggyback off that, most of the athletes that I coached, they knew the flow of the weekend, right? That you get done with day 2 and you're only halfway done, and that, still half the points are on the table. So it's not hard for them, at least for the athletes I was working with, to stay mentally in it because they knew like, this is literally the halfway point. That's it. Like, it's not like you're going into the last day and there's only 2 events left and the points are pretty much set in stone. Like the entire competition basically flipped on its head on the final day. So I think it was very easy for people to keep in mind, like we're coming in to basically compete again. Yeah. It's not just like the wrap up to the event.
Ashley moved up like 15 places on day 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she skyrocketed up there. And yeah, I mean, it's sports and it's competition. Anything can happen. Like you don't know what other people can do. You can make some educated guesses. I feel like someone like Brent Fikowski, who's so analytical and he knows who he's competing against, he can almost like estimate what some of his competitors are going to do. Some of these girls, I didn't even know who they were, right? I don't know. And you always, after the fact, you always see people saying things like, this was better than practice, this wasn't better than practice. So you can't also bank on somebody performing to the level of their ability for better or for worse. So with her, I just didn't know how the points were going to come out. I knew her good events were going to be probably really good, but this was the best field, I think, in the world by worldwide rankings.
By a large margin. So
I was like, I don't know if your home runs are going to be home runs. Like, I don't know if it's going to be a 3rd or a 7th, and that actually can make with the field. The points were a little bit different this year. So like looking at the tables, I'm like, with some people, you're only jumping them 4 points, in a placement. So
and it's almost impossible to get 100 points.
Yes.
Whereas if you're in another region and you have a home run,
I mean, with Tia,
yeah. Anyways, can we dictate? Oh, all right.
We've already done that one.
Most gratifying moment of semis from each coach. We already kind of covered something similar, right?
I want to add, since we did kind of cover this, the team qualifying on that last event was number 1, and like right there with Lydia's snatch, because they PR'd that workout by over 2 minutes, and going into the weekend on paper, that was the first or second worst workout from simulation. There was a lot of anxiety. It had been going very poorly. So like Chris and I discussed, we're like, before the competition started, like the games qualifying spot could very well come down to this workout. And throughout the weekend, they get like a pretty good buffer and then lost a little bit on the run workout. So that was a little bit stressful, but the way that they came together and executed on that workout was unreal. And obviously the way it turned out, they were on the good side of it, but it very easily could have been the other way around. So I think as far as gratitude, like it comes down to luck sometimes, and they didn't necessarily beat who they needed to beat, and they thought it was over, but another team didn't execute. So there is a fair amount of luck in the sport, and it's just, I think, good to remember that, like, all you can control is what you can control, and sometimes you come out on the winning end and sometimes you don't, but they still needed all of those performances to get to where they were.
I'll add, or to that moment, which maybe isn't performance related, but after the clean and jerk workout, I think that they did everybody clean and jerked, right? And I got to the venue late because I got lost on a scooter heading there. Was trying to hit the lift.
Couldn't go left.
Yeah, I know. Couldn't turn left because there was a big highway there. And I was just like, I got stuck going up a hill because it wasn't strong enough and the engine stalled. And I was just like, God, I'm just really failing my job here, making it to the. So anyway, I show up. And Gabby hits a big lift. I got there right before she hit it. And they were like, oh, my God, that was 245. And everyone was telling me. And on my way back, I think like 6 coaches was like, oh, my God, that athlete on your team is really strong. Then I get down into the warm-up area, and they're talking, and I could see like the emotions were kind of weird. And they reported themselves in for the lift. It ended up becoming a bigger – okay, so they actually put 10 extra pounds on Gabby's note on her card basically, and they signed for a higher total than they actually hit. And Gabby was not okay with that and wanted the actual weight, so she wanted to go in and self-report and reduce their score on the leaderboard, which that was super gratifying for me in the moment, like from a gratitude perspective, because it was like a character moment. And I think a lot of people in sport are kind of the like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, or if you get away with something, get away with it. That made me feel really grateful. I actually wrote a whole blog about it like the night of Saturday when they qualified, because it was like, oh man, this is a character value I want to be reflected in our culture. It has nothing to do with them just actually qualifying. That made it cooler. But the moment itself was probably the most gratifying thing to me from an emotional perspective. Or dominating in shuffleboard with Adam after the comp.
Super gratifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because it's against Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say gratifying was a little bit different than like the thing that got us most excited. I think that gratifying, like the one that I'd pick out is probably the team one for sure, and then hearing their interviews afterwards and hearing them talk about it and how like they pictured that scenario going and why they did what they did. Like it makes you proud that they're out there wearing our shirts. Another one for me, I think, was day 2 for Alexis when she was in that third heat. I think that that just kind of goes to show the work that she's done for her mental game, her expectations for herself and where she wants to be. Like, I feel like to put event 1 behind her and still kind of leverage the emotions going into day 2 with those 2 and 3, it was cool to see that she could kind of bring that fire without having people around her. I think the scores that she put up there was just like, all right, like it doesn't really matter who's around you. It doesn't really matter what everybody else is doing. Like, you know what you're capable of and you know that you can go out there and do. And like, she just went out there and grabbed all the points she could.
Yeah. It was a cool climb.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say that it was probably just getting to watch Jake Berman go through the weekend. There's no reason he should have been there. Like every stage of the season, something happened that should have prevented him from moving on. And he just got, I don't want to call it luck, but he got, to Perrin's point, he got lucky every stage, right? Like he hurt his knee on the warming up for the final open workout for 23.3. And it was pretty clear. Like, I've had a meniscus tear, and like he was like, yeah, it's clicking and it hurts out. I'm like, ooh, that's a meniscus. That's probably a meniscus tear. And he went through and he got the MRI, and they're like, you shouldn't do quarters. You have meniscus tear, and there's like bone damage and all this stuff. And then the quarterfinals workouts came out, and there was only wall ball, and then he probably, like, we looked at it and we're like, oh, you're okay, like you can do this. And then he does them all in a 24-hour period. He's like, if I qualify, I qualify. Ends up qualifying. Then he has his score removed, and it's off for like 4 days, and then all of a sudden shows back up, and he's like, oh, I guess we'll go. And then we had a conversation like a week and a half after that, and he's like, yeah, my knee's in a bad place. I've hurt my other quad because I'm compensating, and I probably should sit out. And then the semifinals workouts got released early, and so, like, maybe a few days after that we had that conversation, he's like, oh, I can do pretty much all these. Then he hurt his adductor the week before doing the walking lunge workout, to the point that he's like, I think I might have to pull out. But then it got better enough for him to be able to do all the workouts until the last one. So it was like just getting to see him have a season when for pretty much all purposes, he probably shouldn't have had a season, but he got to finish it out, and seeing him, make it through that snatch ladder, which is like for him, the one that was probably the most important to himself. And I think seeing him get through that and being able to finish it and PR it, given the season that he's had, that was probably the most gratifying for me.
Now time to get healthy, Jake.
Yeah.
Did the heat placements or for Alexis and Lydia help or make day 2 more challenging? Oh, well, Adam,
you just talked about it.
Yeah, just talked about it a little bit. I think that it's you won't like Alexis when she's angry, and she was angry after one, and so I think that it helped a little bit. I think that event 3 specifically, she probably would have gone faster if she was in the last heat. I think that just watching her last 2 to 3 rounds of that one, if she's with those girls, if she's with Tia and Haley and Emma on that, the transitions and the box jump over speed are going to pick up more. So she probably left some points on the table from not being in that one on day 2. Event 2 was pretty much at the limit of her capacity. So I think it was good in a sense that she was pissed off and she went out there and executed, maybe left some points on the table by not being around those girls in 3. But yeah, I think it was kind of a mix of the two.
I definitely think it helped Lydia. I mean, she rises to challenge. I don't know. I don't think she ever dreamed of being in a heat with like Alexis, Cynthia, and all these girls that she's looked up to. And she stepped up. I mean, she smashed those workouts to the point where it actually, I think, gave her some pretty bad DOMs because of the front squat workout. So like she was getting so sore from training for that.
The number of times that girl said, "My legs, my legs."
So like she was getting so sore training for all these events for a month straight. And I mean, she's smaller. That's like a fairly heavy weight. So a lot of times in practice, she was kind of grinding the front squats out, or they were just slower. So she's pausing at the top, and she ripped them during the workout, which was great, but she paid for it because she's like, I just didn't expect the front squat that fast. She could barely walk. And she was pretty sick on day 3, which she wouldn't really talk about, but she started, I think, to get sick actually day 1, and the night of day 2, it like started to catch up to her. So she was fighting both sickness and, like she said, the most soreness she's ever experienced since she first started CrossFit. Yeah. I think we need to figure out some other recovery tools in the future.
I think it's a good thing for athletes to know, though. Over the years, like in the early days of the games, I thought that the best athletes, like, they were just more recoverable and they weren't getting as sore and beat up. But you go through by the end of the games, and when they're not like warmed up and ready to go, they almost look like zombies. Like they're all stiff and tired. Their energy level is low. They have the ability to turn it on and get ready and go, but it is through a lot of discomfort, and being prepped for that mentally and knowing you can hit major PRs when you're in that state is like, it can set you up for performing better, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm going to get so fit that I show up to a competition, I do the workout and I don't get sore. I'm like, no, it won't happen. You're just going to go faster and probably get more sore.
At this stage in the sport, there's no chance that you're going to be that much better than everybody else. It doesn't matter at this point. Like there's no way that you can do that. But to your point also, it's always such a challenge to get people to warm up on day 3 or the last day of the games, because they are so sore and they come in and like you said, zombie. That's such a good description of them. But if you can get them to warm up, they can go out and they can perform. But getting them through that initial process, like, no, you have to get on the bike and you have to ride this for 10 minutes. And no, it can't be at
I don't want to. Yeah, 20 watts, but I'm tired.
No, you have to go faster.
No, it's crazy what experience can do, though, because, I mean, the people that go through that, like, they're probably all experiencing around the same levels of soreness. Maybe some a little bit less, maybe some a little bit more. But what comes from the experience is what you said. It's like, I know I can still operate, even with this. And it's like the other things. Like, I remember talking to Noah back in the day. Like, he would never sleep before a competition. And early on, he would stress about it. Like, oh, man, I didn't sleep last night. Like, this is going to suck. I'm not going to be in shape. Or people who can't eat before competition. But the more experiences you have and you realize, like, man, this is much more of a mental grind than anything else. My body is going to be able to get through it. Whether I'm sore, whether I'm underslept, whether I'm underfed, like I want to try and optimize those things if I can, but if everything's not firing on all cylinders, like I can still trust myself to go out there. So it comes with experience. So now Lydia going forward, like she knows, like that's the most sore I've ever been in my life, and that's the heaviest I've ever snatched in my life. Like she knows, like she has that to lean on now. So it's powerful.
Do you think she'll train? Oh. I was going to say, do you think she'll train harder now?
Yes.
I do too.
100%.
So do I. She's got some confidence.
Yeah.
She is fired up.
Good. How do you manage emotionally having athletes with varying degrees of success? Ooh.
Yeah. I mean,
heartburn. Manage it with heartburn.
I was somewhat lucky this year in that I only had one at this one. You guys all had multiple. I think that it was different for me, so I'll probably let you guys speak to this. I know that last year the big challenge for me was people in every single division and very, very varying degrees of success. And it was almost like Connor got hurt on day 2, and then you got to turn around, you got to try and get somebody hyped up, and then somebody else is not where they're supposed to be while somebody else is having a really good day. And it's hard to switch back and forth between those roles. And one of the things that I tried to do is I tried to always give myself a buffer, like out in the hallway or something, before I would talk to somebody else, because I can't switch hats that quickly.
Yeah.
Like I was literally crying with Connor when we decided to pull him out, and then I had to go warm somebody else up, and I was like, I need a second. I need a second because I cannot switch hats that easily. But you guys, it's probably a little bit more recent for you. So
yeah. Well, I went to Europe just to support Linda, and the competition went awesome. Like, she performed better on every single workout, and it was like you just ride the wave of the one athlete that you're in, and if it goes well, it's a great weekend. If it goes poorly, then you're just even more enmeshed in that bad experience. But this weekend, with Will having an injury to pull out, Travis making it in kind of a like gut-wrenching last-minute Hail Mary type workout, and Annika being in a qualifying position and then missing out, there was a lot of different types of emotions, which kind of suck to go through that wave sometimes. But I'm probably one of the most experienced coaches in the world at having that, because I've coached, you know, in a year where Noah and Travis trained together every day for a couple months, where I really thought both of them were like top 10 in the games, almost guarantees, just based on what they were doing and training open quarters, and then going to semifinals, and Noah having lost to Travis in every training session of the simulation, and then Noah wins the weekend and Travis misses out on qualifying. That was like very emotionally, like it tore me up inside. It's hard to even process. You're like, I can't celebrate because this other person I'm so tied to is having this heartbreaking experience. And I think just over time, I started to realize how to separate myself a little bit emotionally and create like this, hey, here's who I'm going to try to be for them, no matter whether it's good or bad. I don't know if I do that successfully all the time. I'm sure I get sucked into it, but I think you just have to have coping mechanisms. Like, I went to the gym every morning and like tried to keep myself emotionally sane through it. And I think everybody has got to figure out like how they do it. Him through little breaths, me through like my self-care habits, to be like, hey, when you're at these things, you're more than just their Sherpa. Like, you got to like be a human and take care of your emotions too. And I think doing that for myself actually helps them better too, because they know whether it's good or bad. I'm just going to like, you know, for Travis, I'm going to be there talking shit to him. For Annika, I'll be there to listen. Like, I show up for them each different, but I have to manage my own emotions first.
I think it's the hardest part of coaching athletes in competition, when you have multiple athletes at the same time. And I think, to both of your points, it's, as the coach, you have to take care of yourself. And I think in the past, I would try so hard to be everything to everyone, their Sherpa, their emotional support, their bag carrier, whatever. And then when you multiply that by multiple people, it's just not possible you can fulfill all those duties. And so I think time and experience helps. Also, like with Ashley and Lydia specifically, if you have two athletes in the same gym, we've almost practiced that scenario, because I'll have them train with each other, and one might succeed and one might fail. But I think it's always going to be a challenge. Like, I don't think there's any escaping it, and it's really out how we process that and how we choose to respond to our athletes. And also I try to ask my athletes, like, what do you need from me? And they don't always know, I think, or they might not always give you an honest answer. But I think at least if you're communicating with them, what are their expectations of you? Because if they know you have multiple athletes, like, you can't possibly be everything to everyone. So I think setting those expectations as well.
Yeah, it's just emotionally and mentally exhausting. I mean, I coached, and you did the same thing, the West Coast, then East Coast, back to back with the travel in between. And by the time we got done with day 3, on day 1, Max was like, hey, we're going to do, something as a whole organization at the end. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. And then by the time we got to day 3, I was like, I'm out.
I canceled it by day 2.
Yeah, I'm out, guys. I'm going home. But it's just exhausting. And Max, to your point, like, yeah, I think actually taking care of yourself is a huge one. One of the things that this shouldn't be all that surprising, but I fueled myself well this year. I actually brought enough food to like stay on my normal eating plan, my macros, and my God, I was actually able to like be functional at the end. And like if I had to have a conversation, I could talk instead of just fumbling over words.
Sleeping.
Like,
Hashtag TTT nutrition.
Yeah, and not just living on caffeine, although that last cup of coffee was very valuable on day 3. But I think just doing the things to take care of yourself, there's that, like, if your cup's not full, how can you help fill others? I think there's something to be said. Get a lot of sleep. Make sure that you have someone else to talk to deal with your own emotional stuff that comes from dealing with other people's emotional stuff. Try to work out. I always try and do a little bodybuilding session in the morning. It's never like hard CrossFit because I feel like that would be a really terrible idea. And then fuel yourself properly because then you can actually be functional.
One thing I would maybe were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to, what Kyle was saying, and like, I feel like one of the benefits that we have of traveling together as a team is we have each other at the end of the day.
Yep.
And so there's aspects of our experience that we probably don't share with our athletes, which is for the better. If you ask me, like, I think there's some degree of separation there that's important to make sure that, like, you're not offloading your baggage onto them when they're trying to handle all of their crap. But we have each other. And so, like, Mike and I shared a hotel room and we could talk about stuff at the end of the night. Like, what was exciting, what was challenging, what are some things that we could do better. If he's upset about something, like, we can talk about it and there's no judgment involved because we're going through the same thing. And so it's something that I've learned, or I'm trying to do a better job of trying to, like, take advantage of you guys who are going through the same experience that I am.
I was going to add to that from the athlete side. I think it's important that athletes build a support structure outside of being solely dependent on their coach. So you look at successful athletes, they have their spouses, their families, their closest friends from home, where there's like, okay, I could go to my coach for this specific thing, but if I'm just emotionally overwhelmed and I need a hug from somebody, I might go to this person. And like
those, they're definitely not going to get it from Adam.
Yeah, they might. I've pressured him, but I think that's important as a coach too. Is in the early days, I tied my ego to athlete success, and I think because of that, I tried to do too much. And I think over time, I realized, like, well, I can't do all of it. And if I, like, am not taking care of my own emotions and stuff, how can I deal with theirs? But in doing that, then I started teaching them, like, they need to do their own kind of self-counseling. They need to have people that they go to. They need to do personal development work. They need to do all these things so that by the time it gets to that high-pressure moment, whether it goes good or whether it goes bad, they're not needy and dependent on somebody external. They got to be, like, personally responsible as athletes and know who their primary support people are. And I think if people can build that as athletes, it helps on game day.
I had someone ask me while we were there, they're like, I noticed that the TTT coaches seemed less hand-holdy than some of the other coaches. And they're like, why is that? And I was like, I don't know why you're observing that. I was like, but I do know that in general, we as TTT coaches try to teach people to be not self-sufficient, but
it's almost like interdependent, not fully independent, but not needing do this, do that. Or even if it is doing that, it's giving the instruction and then they do it as opposed to, like, needing to be walked through it seems.
Followed around and handheld and I wouldn't have noticed that, but someone brought that up to me and I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that I would still fall in the other realm. I'm very hands-on.
Well, you also only had one there this weekend,
I can afford that.
It's different when you have, when
well,
you
no,
have
I saw even last year when he had like 88. He was pretty hands-on with all of them.
I think that might be part of what helps me manage my emotions is, like, I feel like I have a little bit more sense of control, which could, come back and bite me. Like, if the results don't go the way that they were, I could question myself and what I was doing in the moment because I was too hands-on. But for me, again, it, like, gets back to what Perrin was saying is, like, what do you want out of me? Like, when Alexis and I are at a competition, it helps her stress management for me to be in charge of the clock. Yeah. Like, for me to know warm-up wise how much time we have left, what do we need to touch still.
That's the first time I've ever done that. Linda asked me to do that in Europe, and I took a much more active role of, like, hey, you're 30 minutes out. Yeah. I gave her clear instructions by the minute. It was weird for me because it's literally the first time I did it.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, she was like, that was very helpful. I don't want to be thinking about anything other than what to do. And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
That's not the hand holding that I was talking about. I do that for my athletes. I literally, here's your heat, here's your corral time, here's this. And then I literally, okay, you need to go start your warm up. Like, that's not the hand holding I was talking about.
You mean like walking to each
You mean
station
proximity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like hovering.
Yeah. Yeah,
I know who hated that was Dan Petro, and I learned that real early on.
He hated that you were close.
Yeah, because I would do the same thing. Like I would like that's just my tendency, because that's what I was when I was an athlete. Like I just wanted to be structured and regimented and know when I'm gonna go and like know what I need to do. Yeah. And he's like, man, I'm gonna go talk over here for 10 minutes. Like I don't start for another 15. We're fine. I was like, oh god.
Yeah, it was real weird working. Yeah, doing that with Linda and then going and hanging out with Travis.
Yeah.
I was joking in the weekend. I was like, hey, you want me to write your warm up? And he was like, get away from me.
But they still do well because it just works. Like Dan would go out there and he'd crush it. He'd sound like a world record event on a snatch, and I was like, we didn't even snatch 245. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's just like everybody has their own. But it's like what parents said is like just make sure that you're talking to them about it.
Oh, he just
he pushed us off.
Yeah. What one programming thing do you think you got right leading up to semis, and one thing you could have changed knowing what you know now? Oh, I got some good ones.
I got some.
Yeah, you go first. Yeah, you were ready.
I know.
Thought you were gonna bite my finger off.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since, especially after going through East, whether or not to test the full workouts with people, depending on how much time they have. And I don't feel like there is a perfect formula for anyone, and it really becomes individual, because there are some circumstantial things where like I couldn't test something with somebody for whatever reasons, or maybe it's going to be a really tough workout, so you need to build confidence over the time you have. But what I will say, I feel like there were more times than not where it backfired because of the reasons I alluded with Ashley, where there was a comparison and expectation of how something should feel at a certain point in time, and it didn't align with the reality, and it ended up hurting their pacing, where they essentially went out too hot. But it was also an issue in the West, because that run course, even though I believe the distance was slightly less, it was really hard on their legs. And I think that carried through the whole competition from the beginning. So we didn't necessarily account for that. And some athletes, Stacy, for example, are very, very tough. And they might say that they're sore, but they don't even necessarily understand the impact of how that might impact your front squat workout or something else. So that's hard, I think, sometimes. Like, sometimes that's just the nature of the beast. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. But what I will say about semifinals in general, which is now kind of the regionals format where everybody gets the workouts ahead of time, it just depends how long you prepare. It's the closest in our sport to actually doing the same sport and preparing for the same events, where normally it's random, and like the games is going to be random. There might be some events ahead of time, but you can actually see who can prepare well and perform to their level of ability in these events more than anything else. So I think it's also part of being a good athlete in this sport. Like, are you able to do that and maybe toggle a little bit higher or lower depending on where you're at, and using your intuition in the workout to adjust your strategy?
Yeah, I think to that point, it just kind of, there was a conversation that I had with a lot of athletes while we were there, and that was that when you are doing the same event in competition, that it's not necessarily going to feel the same. Like, competition brings out so many different emotions, and the physiology is different and the environment's different and all those things. So it affects the way that you perform out there, and you can't necessarily expect that you're going to do exactly what you did in testing. And so to your point, I had some athletes who wanted to test the workouts a lot. Jake Berman wanted to test the workouts as many times as possible, all of them. So he would go out there and just be very confident in his performance. And he generally did better in the workouts than he did in testing. But then I had other athlete, Ellie, who tested all of them, had these very elaborate pacing strategies that she had developed from testing the workouts all the times. And then she would go out there and she didn't feel the way that she did in testing. And so as a result, never adjusted her pacing strategies in the moment and wasn't listening to those red flags that you were talking about before. And so blew herself up on the first event as a result of that. So if I were to go back, like Jake, I would have test the workouts fewer times because, he ended up hurting his adductor testing the lunge workout. And I think he just tested him a few too many times. Ellie, we would have done him one time and then just done intervals to completely remove her from that. Annalise, we only tested him one time because she was in the West, didn't really have as much time, but we should have probably tested the run workout again so she could have felt that, kind of stress again. And I think it's very interesting how, each of the athletes, you need to play with the dials a little bit individually. Some of them probably do need to test a lot. Someone like Ellie probably just test one time and then run intervals and not worry about doing, elaborate pacing strategies, and just go out there and listen to your engine.
Yeah. I think just to go specific to the question, the programming thing, I think that I feel we got right, I'd say extended organizationally. We sat down and really looked at what the tests were last year. We stayed on top of the podcast of what went out. If you look at the programming from open all the way through semis, no 1-rep max test. There was a lot more lifting under fatigue, a lot more pure capacity. We really made the shift in our online program, in what the workouts from Compete that we selected for the on-site group, prioritizing for each individual athlete what they needed to work on. And I feel like macro-wise, if I just zoom out and try to see like, okay, all the things that we do individually with athletes or with our group stuff, I would say that I feel most confident in the macro. Like I got the peaks right. Almost everyone I worked with showed up on game day feeling good at their highest level of fitness so far through the season. And I felt really, really, really good about that. The one thing that I would say I would specifically have changed was testing workout number 1 with Annika. She did one test run of it, and she did it in a race format with another semifinal athlete. She's more field-driven as an athlete in general, and we just over the last 2 years have been working on like the data of her run paces and, okay, what's sustainable 800s, what's 1Ks, but almost all of her run work was mostly done just as running or running in other cyclical machines, which I think is very different when you pair it with heavy weightlifting. Yeah. And she did the test. Her testing time was really good, but her execution of it was kind of blown, like she blew herself up, and she didn't have any of her pace splits on every single component of the workout. And it was the only time she had tested it after we got the standards, which meant there was only like another week or so. So she didn't want to test it again. And by bad luck of the draw, she was in the final heat of that workout, and right in front of her were Haley and then Tia. And both of them went out setting basically world record paces on that workout in a super fast heat. So she had instructions to let them go because I knew they were going to be there. And she did let them go. Like even out the door, they were already like 100 feet past her. So it's not like she chased them, but even subconsciously, I think she went too fast in that first round. And then a result of that, there was too much time lost on the barbell. I think had we retested it in full with full split data of everything, and I had a full video to watch and help her go through that one, she may have been able to wear a watch, paced her first 800 or her second 800, and not had as much of a blow up experience. So that's kind of one in hindsight, I feel like I got to take on the chin. Like, yes, there's always the athlete performing and executing and whatever, but there's also what can I do better in the future as a coach to not have that. And that would definitely be the one thing that stands out from my this year's semifinals.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Max. I think macro-wise, I was pretty happy with the build-up. I think that being week 3 for Alexis, it was always going to be a challenge. We only did workout 4 in full. We did everything else as partials. We would do 3 rounds of 1 or do like a 15-12-9 on the barbell. We did 3 rounds of 2, 5 rounds of 3, like just trying to learn what we could about them and then watching the other regions go. I think that was the most valuable for me, is just seeing what are these paces that these girls are trying to hold on the row? What's the barbell split for workout 1? Who's going unbroken on toes to bar? That's the value in this one. Like Perrin was saying earlier, is I feel like in week 3, it's more of a metric of the fittest versus who had the best strategy. Because by then it's like things had normalized out and everybody kind of knows what they can do. It was fun watching week 1 when it was like Gabby had one strategy, and I think it was Amy Kringle.
Yeah, she touch and go the whole first set. She did
touch and go, and it was like interesting to see like, hey, even with that, like the fast run is making up for it, or like it was still like a close race at the end. So it was fun to watch, but I feel like by week 3, like a lot of that kind of difference in execution had sort of like leveled out. I do think that looking back, I would have probably done a full one of workout 2. I think that just knowing what the double unders were going to feel like at the very end in rounds 4 and 5 kind of surprised her a little bit, and she was tripping at the very end. And she'd even said that. She's like, man, that completely changed in round 4. And we said that going in. Like, anytime that you have a 5-round workout like that, like it's always round 4, which is just always going to hit you right in the teeth. But it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to experience it. And so I think that's probably one of the things that I would have changed is like, let's hit that full thing so she knows what it feels like. She knows that like, if I start tripping on my double unders, I just got to relax my shoulders a little bit and breathe through it. I can still do it. Yeah, but I think that one of the things that we still did well, which I was proud of, is being 3 weeks out, we didn't allow all of these events to completely guide our training. We were still able to do some of the other things that we know are going to be coming up in August. So I was happy with that. I was happy with that balance. We got in and out of the weekend pretty healthy, and excited to see what comes.
My question to you would be, if this was Alexis from 3 years ago, would you approach it the same way, or do you think you'd test more?
I think it'd still be the same. I think that it's close to, like, both her and I kind of just want to get a feel for things versus doing the whole thing in entirety. I think, like you said earlier, it's hard for an athlete to feel one full experience, and then if it doesn't completely line up to that one way or the other, it can be almost misleading in a way. But there's some people like Jake who it's just like, I want to know what it feels like. I want to know what I'm getting myself into, and I want to be able to learn the lessons inside of training. The one thing that I think I would change, I know that my bias when I see events is to break them up a lot, to intervalize them, to come up with paces, to know what my turnover is going to be on certain parts. What that comes back to, and like drawback of that, is very rarely do we go long enough. So for event 1, like if her run pace dropped down on 4 and 5, it's because for the most part, we weren't doing 15 and 20 minute continuous efforts. So I think just knowing that about myself, if I go back and try and grade my prep for that, it's making sure that, hey, not everything can be intervals. Every now and then you still got to go long, even though there's only one long event, just making sure that she's ready for that sort of continuous effort.
Like, you just got to meet the stimulus.
Yeah.
Ironically, so me and Travis have had multiple seasons like that, where I was like, you just don't even do it in the gym anymore. One attempt, and you have to do it on game day and just get a feel. This season, right before the quarterfinals workouts came out, we have a conversation, and I was like, hey, you're going to have like a month maybe by the time they come out. Do you want to do them? And he was like, no. And then they came out. He tested
them all within like 2 days.
Yeah, he basically did a simulation, and I was like, I guess you changed your mind. I can't really fault you for that.
We were trying to overlap Trav and Lex, and Max the night before, he's like, yeah, Trav's not going to do any of these in full. I come in, and like he's in the middle of workout 1 with Jake. I'm like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
I think he did the last workout like 6 times.
Yeah. And then I wrote partial intervals of it, and he's like, I just did the whole lunge anyway. And I was like, all right, whatever.
That happened so many times with Jake too, where I would write an interval version of the workout, and he's like, I just retested it, PR'd by 12 seconds. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Boys.
Yep. Herding cats. Did the workouts have enough diversity, or did they lean towards a specific type of athlete?
I kind of already commented on the athlete size that we saw, and that was both in the West and the East. On the male side, they were much larger than they have been. Not last year. Last year were some bigger athletes, but in years past, where you had like a mix of athlete heights and weights, this was just kind of pushed towards the larger athlete, I thought.
I'd say relative to other seasons, like that's really the only barometer, not to some arbitrary standard of like, this is perfect fitness testing. But if we're just saying compared to CrossFit, I'd say this is actually a pretty good balanced subset of tests. There was a shorter sprint, something relatively long. There was, I don't know if you call them high skill gymnastics, but I think handstand walk and legless rope climb in that, if relative to our sport, is a pretty good, like, gymnastics component. There was high volume simple gymnastics with the toes to bar. There might have been a little bit of extra reliance on machines because there were 2 bikes, 1 row, and 1 run. So that maybe means it's like more capacity than strength, because the only real strength things required a lot of capacity on the snatch workout, and then like the grip strength and lunge. I don't know if that's like a full comprehensive strength, but I'd say overall, these tests for me would be like, I'm not going to nitpick them as much as maybe other ones. Like, I think last year when I looked at it, I was like, this is just the implements aren't great for standardization. The skill of these skills under this format with just learning them and the standards that they apply, I didn't like. And it leaned away from well-rounded fitness.
They were trying to be too cute last year.
Yeah.
If you ask me, it was too much. There was too much going on in some of those events to really get an accurate test of fitness. But I forget, you guys are going to have to remind me, this is the second year that all the semifinal workouts have been the same across regions.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then when we're talking about diversity from like year to year, I think that this was a good subset of tests to be able to get the fittest through. I think last year, which would have been the first year of the standardized test, I thought it was too much. I thought it was too heavy based. The athletes I went through compared to this year, I think that it kind of like reflected that a little bit. And I think that it was probably almost like maybe too diverse last year. Like they just tried to do too much. I don't even know what they were testing with some of those.
Yeah, agreed.
I think looking back at these tests, I think the assault bike, rope climb, box jump over test, I think I would have changed the box jump over to something, maybe burpee box jump over or something like that. I don't feel like that test ever, I don't feel like it was a balanced enough test. Maybe make the echo calories handstand push-ups or something like that. I think that would have changed the overall finishes of athletes a lot in this.
It was weird that they had 2 echo bikes.
Yeah.
It was weird that they didn't have very much any upper body pressing. Like clean and jerks on one, that's not an upper body press. That's your legs on that. I'm sorry. But yeah, to not have any pressing is like the one thing, but if they save it for the games, I'm not upset about that.
For sure. For sure. That was my one thing. I think I would have replaced the Echo 10 cals with probably 10 strict handstand push-ups.
Why do you think they changed the girl cals on the last one, but not that one?
No idea.
Yeah.
Time caps? I don't know.
I'll never forget the briefing in Europe where they asked, why is there no last legless rope climb? And the guy giving the brief was standing there, and Adrian Bosman was sitting over the side, and he put the mic behind his back like this, looked over, didn't get an answer, and goes, I don't know. And we just moved on, and everyone was like,
fair enough.
All right, okay.
Deal.
I would also advocate for the end of high volume box jumps with step offs laterally, especially when they're high. I mean, it really is a huge disadvantage to be like a short guy and have to step off. They were like falling off, like Scott Tetlow and Colton were like barely able to get their feet on the ground. I feel like if you're trying to save Achilles tendons, maybe you just always make them burpee box jump overs or like there's a way to do it, because it's just such a weird skill that I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's like, oh, this is the best way to test fitness and plyometric repeats.
That test would have been better with burpee box jump overs.
Yeah.
Six burpee box jump overs at 30 inches would have been a much better test.
Yeah, or let them rebound, which I know it will make the people that can rebound separate huge on there. It might increase injury risk, but maybe part of defining the sport is just saying like, hey, if you get to this level, you need to be able to rebound this in volumes or something like that.
It's just consistency and decision making is what I'd want out of that. So the thought would be, you guys can't rebound because we're worried about your Achilles. But by the way, you can just touch this 15-foot target and then
drop
just
straight
fall.
off. And someone did
don't
hurt
care about
their
that.
Achilles.
Yeah,
doing
so
that.
make a decision and stick with it. If it's for safety, make sure it's safety across the board. If it's like, hey, let's race, let them race across the board.
Yeah.
That's what I would want out of
Yeah,
it.
I agree. Anyways, next question.
That was the one.
Yeah. Perrin, you read it.
What is the best one-liner?
Oh, Dana.
As a reflection you use to help your athletes snap out of it and refocus when/if they start mentally falling apart?
I don't know if I have a one-liner.
I don't have a one-liner, but I definitely encourage athletes to have a mantra, especially those that lean towards negativity when things start to get really dark. And not everybody, this doesn't happen for everybody, but I think that is a good tactic to keep them in it, or even a strategy. Like, it could just be like dissociating, right? Like, or being surrounded with people that are your family and your friends, they don't really give a shit about CrossFit. Because I think removing yourself from the stress of the competition is how you're going to conserve energy. And by the time you get to day 3, in this format, you have 50% of the competition, and that's when you start to see people, zombies, tired. But that is where I think the best in the world excel the most. Yeah. It's like they almost can see it on other people's faces, and they're like, okay, go for it, jugular.
Go for the kill.
It happens at the games. You don't want to warm up. You're tired, or maybe you're having a bad competition, and I don't know if it's necessarily one line that can already like get somebody back in. It's like almost their own coping skills that they've learned and mastered through experience.
Yeah. I don't think I could turn anything into a one-liner. I'm too verbose for that. But yeah, I think it's their habits, their behaviors, their community, their preparation, and then just trying to do your best to understand in the moment what you're dealing with, what you could say that's best. And sometimes it's different with different people. Like sometimes I will choose to joke with Travis instead of saying something serious, just because I'm trying to keep it light to keep him out of his head. But you don't really know if that's the right thing or not. So you're like kind of gauging feedback. Like, oh, I say this and he didn't like that. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say that next time.
I think that I probably would have gravitated more towards one-liners, or like something that I thought was going to snap somebody out of something, like earlier in my career. I think that where I go with it now is, it's funny. We were just watching Inside Out last night.
Great movie.
Oh man,
they're coming out with 2.
Yeah.
Number 2.
I know. That's why it was on so high up Disney Plus. But we were watching it with the boys, and well, first off, that thing is just so accurate, like, neuroscience wise. Like that's crazy how much they put into that. Anyways, one of the things that like the main story of all of that is this idea of like toxic positivity, right? Like the fight between joy and sadness, and like the value that sadness can bring to something. And like one thing that I've learned over the course of coaching at lots of these competitions and lots of different kinds of athletes is, I think it's important for athletes to engage with an emotion before they can let it go entirely. So I think that a one-liner would push us through that and shove something under the rug that's not going to allow them to process that entirely, versus, hey, let's think about this. Let's engage with this emotion, whether it's sadness, whether it's frustration, whether it's embarrassment, whether it's shame. Let's sit with this for a second. Let's think about how we can leverage it, and then let's move on. Because then it's like, it's not a one-liner, but it's something where you're trying to get them to understand what it is that they're going through versus just trying to immediately snap out of it. And like, that shift in how I try and help people process their emotions over these competitions, it just seems so much more beneficial for them. And it seems more beneficial for them as human beings also. Like watching that with the boys last night, it's like, yeah, you're crying because you're sad, and that's important. Like, it was sad that Bing Bong died, but
Bing Bong, Bing Bong.
But it's like, that's a life lesson that I think they can learn from sports. And that's what I'd want my athletes to be able to take away from that is like, hey, listen, you're sad. You need to understand why you're sad. And now, hey, let's go get pissed off. So little things like that. Like I remember at Granite Games a couple of years ago when we were there, and Bryn started off kind of slowly, and it was right before the thrust and run workout. And I was like, Bryn, what do you want to do right now? Like, do you want to just try and like put this in the past? Do you want to just like try and move on, or do you want to get pissed off? She's like, I want to get pissed off. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. Like what you're going to do is you're going to take this experience that was very unfavorable, that you almost want to forget about, that you don't want to think anymore about, and you're going to figure out how to make yourself better for having gone through it. And I was like, man, this is what I need going forward. And like that changed how I coach people. And now it's like Alexis at the games after the ski bag, like it was frustrating. It was embarrassing. It was like filled her with anger. But then we were like, hey, this anger is going to be useful, because not only do we have like favorable events coming up, we've got a ton of competition coming up. So if she just like repressed all of those things, it's like, I don't think that that's really useful. Let's process them, let's engage with them, and then let's figure out how we can move on.
Yeah. Emotions also bring a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Like emotional competitors who are passionate, angry, anxious, if you can harness it as opposed to letting it fizzle your energy out when you're not going, I think that's what can make some great competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can blunt how you feel in your body. I mean, like Lydia felt like trash going into that snatch event, and the adrenaline she felt from everyone cheering for her. She's like, I've never experienced anything like that in my life.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah.
I think that
that's it. Shut up, Kyle. What do you say to your athletes when things don't go well? Yeah, we've killed that one. We still appreciate your question, Josh. Do you know that Lydia was going to do the Trevor tug? This really should be like the Perrin pull, but it became the Trevor
tug.
tug.
People know where it came from.
Yeah. We were in quarterfinals messing around with that row dumbbell step up workout, and Perrin sits on the rower and like pulls the rower over her head, and she's like, I'm telling you, this is a hack. I've learned it from a rower or whatever. And Trav was like warming up on the side and was like, what the hell is she doing? I was like, I don't know. I've never seen that in my life, but she swears that it works. Travis did it in his warm up, pulled it out. He made Chris made a reel about it. Of all of the videos and education and things we've tried to curate, the thing calling a Trevor tug of a joke was like the highest viewed video we've ever made.
And
1.6 million views.
No way. But also just most educational. Like this is how you do things, kids. These are fundamentals right here.
Hey, trust us. We know how to do things here.
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway, so
I didn't even see Lydia do it.
She did it.
She did do it.
And I knew she was going to. She told me.
Did you tell her to do it? Okay.
Nope. She said, I'm doing this Trevor tug. She's like, because it works. I'm like, you're right.
There we go.
She do it every round?
I only saw her do it at the end.
Oh, okay.
But she knew, like something like that is the difference between a second on a rower, especially for someone like her, where so I didn't comment on the programming question, but I'm going to interject here. The row handstand walk, I actually liked the least. I thought that generally the tests were pretty balanced, but that's where I would have liked to see something like strict handstand push-ups, because I felt like it went with the flow. But I felt like that workout was either rowing or handstand walking. Like, there were some athletes that capitalized on their speed and didn't row it as fast, but I would say the majority, obviously those who had the best combination, but I just felt like it was incomplete. But obviously I'm also biased. I mean, Ashley smashed that workout. Lydia did not. She did basically what she did in practice, but I did know she was going to do the Trevor tug. If you haven't tried it, I mean, see for yourself.
You should definitely try to tug.
Does the atmosphere make a difference to the athletes and coaches? Yes.
Hell yeah, brother.
Just for Lydia, right? Like the amount of energy that Lydia got from the crowd on those last two events, like I don't know if you'd be able to replicate that out west, right?
Yeah.
I don't think she'd ever be able to replicate that unless it was in the situation that she was in.
Yeah, it's not to say that there weren't good people at the West. Like the people that were in the crowds were like, they were being loud, but like
All
the energy right there.
Yeah. There just weren't many.
The energy that she got and like having you guys sitting right in front of her, like of course the atmosphere makes a huge difference.
And it made a difference as a coach too. Like it was the West was very subdued, felt very subdued versus being in the East where it, you walked out there into the little coaches thing at the back and you felt a lot of energy from the stands there.
Europe was so cool. Europe is very tribal and very supportive. So there was like screams in every heat. They're calling out names and people in the stands are cheering and like have those drums and like almost felt like soccer hooligans in there. And I really enjoyed it. Normally, like crowds and being super close proximity to like a lot of noise and I'm like on edge, but there it like fired me up like in a very different way. And you could tell like there was national support, athletes had a lot of support, and that was really cool. East was similar, but I felt like East was very focused on either like certain a couple moments or certain people. But I felt both of them were like really positive contributors for me. And in the last year that I went to Knoxville, I was like a bumtron city. Like I went in there and I was like, this sucks. Like there's no one
I've
here.
Never heard that phrase before.
Yeah, me either. I think I might have made it up.
Nice.
Yeah, but this year was different. So it does make a difference because if you show up as a coach to a high premier event with athletes and there's screaming and good energy, then we leave the weekend feeling like, oh shit, things are moving in a good direction. Yeah. When you leave and you're like, oh, there's no one here, no one cares about this, whatever. It's like, hold on, wait, we're committing our whole years to this.
Yeah. I left West Coast and literally had this conversation with a parent. I was like, I'm a little worried about the sport. And then we went to the East and I was like, oh, we're okay.
Yeah.
We're all right.
I mean, take that European one, but also then probably go up a level to Torian. Like I've never been there, but to hear Matt talk about it and then like, to see it on the screen, it's like, that's just a completely different level of energy the whole time.
Maybe we need to go there.
They have fire.
Flames.
They have pyrotechnics. Who doesn't want that?
We have flames.
I'd be more okay with that than noise.
Flames?
Light everything on fire. Just lower the music. Damn it.
Can we whisper? Let's whisper.
I feel like we need to recruit Europe and Australian fans to make sure they get to Texas.
Yeah.
Random guy.
Yeah.
Is it hard managing a team who has expectations of going to the games from a random guy?
Yes, random guy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. But I think it's hard managing anybody who has expectations of going to the games. With the team, obviously, it's 4 people. So you have 4 people with different emotions, different skill sets. Being in a team and the team on their podcast talked about this, it has a lot of positives and negatives because you win together or you fail together. And that camaraderie, I think, really helps people emotionally. At the same time, there are workouts sometimes structured where there might be one specific person that it feels like they're kind of the bottleneck. And on the other hand, it can be that same person sometimes who's the hero. Yeah. And I feel like humans naturally gravitate towards kind of seeing the negative side and don't always see the positives. And I think that blend of people and emotions and how you process that and the best teams, in my opinion, like they rise and fall together and they don't, call each other out or blame each other for those things because they know in the end it pretty much balances out. But the games is hard. It's extremely competitive. The East was super stacked. We knew it. I mean, we knew some of the teams going in, but it's also hard to gauge sometimes because the teams change a lot. Yeah. So you don't really know who you're competing against until you get there. So in some ways, I feel like there's less pressure because, like, it's not like it's Rich's team or whatever. We knew Noah's team was going to be good, and you're not really competing with them. So we just kept the focus on, like, what do we need to do to be as good as possible? What is going to be the harder workouts for us, and where do we need to put more of the eggs in the basket? And also, where can we hit home runs? We kind of played to a little bit of those ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. I also think I have been slowly trying to get people to stop having performance-based expectations. I don't think I've seen it help people perform well. I think you can have performance-driven goals. Like, I want to perform and make it and be a podium or win. But expectation, I think, creates some sense of entitlement. And I think you put it in your post today or yesterday that I read, like, nothing is guaranteed from competition. You have the best athlete in the world show up, sprain an ankle on workout 1 and be out of contention. And there's no promises and nothing that you can do to fix those types of situations. Now, the cream of the crop golden gooses seem to just figure it out no matter what situations are going, and they figure it out. But I don't think that, from what I've seen on a broad level of everybody else at every level in every sport, keeping yourself humble is very important. They say it's always, like, easier to get to the top than stay on top. And once you start having expectations that, oh, I'm good enough because I put in all the work, I think then that takes you away from, like, doing the work at the level that you need to do. That's just maybe my personal bias right now, but I think low expectations on outcome and high expectations on what you do to attain your outcome is just a better, like, mental framework as athletes.
Yes.
All right. For athletes that didn't make the games, when do they start training again? What do you do with them? We lock them in cages.
Yeah. Obviously.
How dare you displease me?
They get the bamboo cane.
Yeah, to be determined. Like, Will got hurt, so he's got a rehab.
Hey, is Will going to do the Masters games? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to do it. He is going to take a break and rehab and figure it out. So, like, that is going to dictate his process of training. Annika is going to, like, refocus, set goals, figure out what she's training for, and that process could take 2 weeks. It could take a month. It could take 6 weeks, and I kind of just let it happen. And I think for me, always, when you have a big goal and it doesn't go well, there's always just that period of rest and reflection where you start to figure it out. So I don't really do anything with them other than give them space and try to do my part of encouraging the right discussions at that time.
Yeah, I don't have anyone who's started back yet, although I did tell Annalise that she was like, yeah, I haven't done anything. And I was like, what do you mean anything? She's like, literally anything. I was like, go and do a class workout tomorrow. Like,
get out of bed.
Yeah, you have to, like, start doing things now. Adam said something to me the other day. He said, momentum works both ways. And that's now officially part of my coaching lexicon. Yeah. I'm going to just be using that all the time. But I think that's also important to remind the athletes who didn't qualify that, like, you can take some time off, but, like, at some point you got to start taking steps towards what's next.
I feel like momentum goes both ways, but it goes down faster.
It's because it has
at least with my fitness.
It has gravity assisting it.
I feel like the one thing that I would add to this in terms of how we think about an athlete's year, how we think about their season, is the people that for whatever reason didn't make it to the CrossFit Games. I think it's important that we don't allow them to think about that as a wasted season, because so many things go into that, right? Like, we had Freya, God bless her. We had Connor. We had Tanner missed out because he was sick at the wrong weekend. Somebody didn't get the right mix of tests. Like, I'd hate to think that CrossFit athletes inside of the sport, with all the competitive opportunities that exist to them, get so wrapped up in the fact that they didn't make the games or they didn't make quarters or semis. Like, that's one competition out of a multitude of opportunities that you should still try and think about sinking your teeth into. So especially for athletes who probably have the capacity to have made the games, but didn't, now it's almost like the world's open to you. Like, now it's your oyster. Like, I think that you should almost, like, get a little bit excited about, like, what's coming next instead of, like, getting too down in the dumps about it. I think it does you a service as an athlete to have something that you can put as a light at the end of the tunnel to look forward to in your training to get back to things again. But it's also, I think, for the sport, it's important for us to be putting bodies in seats at other competitions to make sure that this whole thing is, like, gaining momentum.
I agree, but I still think we should put them in cages.
Learn your lesson.
Yeah. Next question. Adam, can you and Caleb play Halo tonight?
Random dude. Yeah, we're on every night, man. It's you guys that aren't logging in.
Ooh.
The truth does hurt.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Wait, what's happening? All right, bye.